Hello everyone, I'm Shauna Sanford.
And I'm Attorney John Redmann. Welcome to this special 2013 election edition of Power of Attorney. We are changing things up a bit from our regular format to focus on the all-important November elections. Tonight we are turning our attention to the race for Jefferson Parish Juvenile Court Judge. One of the candidates will replace retiring Judge Nancy Amato Conrad.
Now, our guests are Attorney Barron Burmaster, a Republican who is an executive district attorney. He has been a prosecutor in Jefferson Parish for more than 2 decades, and he's been the deputy chief of the district attorney's juvenile division for 10 years. We are also very pleased to welcome Attorney Zoe Fleming, a Democrat who has been an attorney in private practice in the area of juvenile justice for more than 2 decades. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. The candidates will be given 1 minute each for opening and closing statements, approximately 1 minute to answer questions, and there will also be time allotted for a rebuttal. John?
Sorry about that. Thank you for being here. The candidates agreed on an order of opening statements. Mr. Burmaster will go first. You may begin.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Shauna. First of all, I'd like to say I'm pleased to be here. It's been a hectic campaign thus far, but we're down to the final 2 candidates. The election is November 16th. I'd like to get that out right away. Once again, we expect a low turnout, so I think it's very important everyone remembers that November 16th date. Early voting is going on right now. It started Saturday the 2nd, runs through the 9th. So if you can't vote on the 16th, please get to the registrar of voters and cast your vote prior to the 16th. I would just like to point out that of my time in the DA's office, actually 14 years were in the juvenile division. 3 of them were as a full-time trial assistant, daily trying cases, trying all the matters that the DA's office handles in juvenile court. The last 10 years in juvenile court, I was the supervisor, the deputy chief, training new DAs, going through screening cases, getting them ready for trial, evidence, how to handle witnesses, those type things. And then I used that experience parlayed into being appointed to different boards and commissions to help with juvenile justice reform.
Attorney Fleming.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I am honored to be in the runoff. As Mr. Burmaster has pointed out, this runoff is coming up quite quickly. I hope that every single citizen in Jefferson Parish votes. It's that important because there is no court that is more important to anyone than this court. This is juvenile court. This is the foundation. This is the start. I'm in this race. First of all, if I may, my name is Zoe.
Zoe, okay, thank you.
And actually, I have over 30 years in juvenile courts experience. I have been, as a private attorney, the only private attorney, and I can tell you that point blank, over the last 20+ years, week in, week out, to be in juvenile court in Jefferson Parish in various and different capacities within that courtroom, practicing law. I've represented the children, I've represented parents, I've represented grandparents, I've represented the state of Louisiana on termination of parental rights. I have represented the court itself as the hearing officer. I helped to establish the hearing officer's program, which established paternity, so children were off of welfare and the responsible parties were therefore required to provide support and also to set the child support. I'm here, I run, because I'm very concerned about the system as it stands right now.
Okay, and we're going to give you a chance to get into that. As a matter of fact, we're going to get started with questions. Both of you really do have a passion for the law, but why in particular juvenile law? And we'll begin with you.
My senior year in law school, the legislature of Louisiana noted that children who had been abused and neglected were not represented and set up a law. Unfortunately, there was no funding for the law. So at my senior year in law school at Tulane, we opened a law clinic. I was one of the 8 students picked. I had a case. I thought it was very simple and straightforward. I wanted to see my client. The judge denied that. I didn't understand that. I took a writ to the 4th Circuit, which was then the appellate court. They denied it. I didn't understand that. I went to the Supreme Court of Louisiana, and 6-1 in the case, the Supreme Court said, lawyers are to protect their clients, and all the more so for an 18-month-old who cannot speak, is that client's needs must be protected by the advocate, the attorney. So I established the very clear law as to what the responsibility was for the attorney in representing a child. And once that happened, although I came from a poor family, I was hooked into law because I loved it. I love what I did. There was a reward there you cannot get anywhere else.
Thank you. Mr. Burmaster.
Yes, being in the DA's office for about 2 years, an opening came up in the juvenile division, and Andrea Price Jansen, who is now a judge, had just been made supervisor of the division, and I had worked with her on several cases. And I thought it'd be a good chance to go work with her in juvenile court to hone my skills as an attorney, evidence-wise. Juvenile court doesn't have juries, but to get ready for jury trials, I thought it'd be a good idea to go to juvenile court, become a experienced trial attorney in juvenile court before I moved to felony. Little did I know I would not move back to felony. I got to juvenile, working with Judge Jansen. The Children's Code had just come in maybe a year or two before. I really took a liking to the juvenile justice system. It gave me rewards and benefits that, we talked a little bit before the show about, how you see some terrible stories, but also the rewards of when things work out well, when you help families. Those rewards, the benefits are just astronomical, and I really enjoyed it, and I really wound up liking juvenile law, and I didn't leave.
Next question to Mr. Burmaster. What makes you, and then we'll ask Zoe, what makes you uniquely qualified to become a judge in the area of juvenile law in Jefferson Parish Juvenile Court?
I think it comes down to experience, qualifications, and temperament. My experience, as we've mentioned already, 14 years working in the juvenile system, a regular trial DA on a daily basis, handling child support, child in need of care, delinquency matters. I was the drug court DA for 10 years. I was actually the DA that started the juvenile drug court along with the court system. I handled all the traffic matters there. For 10 years, I was the actual screener. Every first offense in a Jefferson Parish for a juvenile, I screened those cases. So I had to look to make sure that all the elements of the crime were there, which is pretty much what the judge has to do when you're the judge when there's no jury. You have to make sure the state proves the case by presenting the elements, and the evidence is there to find those children guilty or not guilty. So I had that experience, and using those experiences, I think gave me the qualification. And then also, I think any attorney who ever worked with me would tell you, I'm easy to get along with, but I'm also hard. I do what needs to be done. I make the hard decision, but I'm also fair, and I think that makes me a good judge candidate.
Ms. Fleming, why don't you tell me why you believe you are uniquely qualified to sit in the position of judge in that courthouse?
There are several reasons. First of all, my experience comes from literally being around the courtroom. As the attorney representing children in abuse cases, in neglect cases, as the attorney representing children in delinquency cases, as the attorney representing parents in adoptions, as the attorney representing parents in voluntary transfers, as the attorney representing parents who are the parents of delinquents. I've represented grandparents in different capacities. As I said earlier, I've represented the state of Louisiana in termination of parental rights when parents did not do their job. I have done a great deal of child support cases, both representing recipients as well as payors, and as the hearing officer in juvenile court, as well as I sat as law clerk for 3 years in juvenile court. I have been around the whole table. I know from each perspective what to do, and I think a judge really needs to know what people are going to say, how they're going to say it, why they're going to say it, and whether or not it's appropriate. Also, there's something I think is very important. I'm independent. I have no backing. I have no person who I'm beholden to.
Okay, now this next question is to you. Both of you know very well that this particular juvenile court has really been called a leader in the state, particularly when it comes to implementing policies to help juveniles. And Attorney Fleming, you have said that you believe, or that you would want to hold parents and guardians accountable for the behavior and the actions of their kids. First of all, why do you think that would work? And secondly, how would you go about doing that?
Okay, well, let me start with this. The statement that it's been a leader in the state of Louisiana because we were not. What happened was the Jefferson Parish was doing an appalling job with children. The children who were of African American heritage were the ones who were disproportionately put away. In fact, children who were smacking gum were arrested from the school system, directly from school. The MacArthur Foundation finally came in and gave a grant of $500,000 in 2007, I believe. The reason they gave the grant was because they recognized we didn't have evidence-based objective criteria by which we were putting people in jail. Then the Southern Poverty Clinic had to actually sue and force Jefferson Parish into compliance. problem that we have is Jefferson Parish isn't doing what it needs to do and hadn't been and was only compelled to do that. That is an issue. Now you ask about how to make parents and children accountable. It's real easy. A first-time offender, I think, gets to spend a night in jail. We need to get in and find out. If a parent is responsible, we have authority. The district attorney's office prosecutes the parent.
Okay, I'm going to ask that same question to you, Mr. Burmaster, and tell us what you believe or how you believe involving families, or how would you involve families when it comes to dealing with these juveniles who get into trouble if elected?
And first of all, I'd like to say Jefferson Parish is a leader in juvenile justice in the state. Contrary to what Ms. Fleming just said, we weren't compelled to go out and get the MacArthur grant. We sought the MacArthur grant. We sought the help from the outside agencies. We knew there were problems. When the Juvenile Justice Reform Act took place in 2003, Jefferson Parish was the leader in helping to get that Reform Act passed. I served on committees, so did the judges in Jefferson Parish. Judge Conrad, who's leaving the bench, was a leader in the juvenile justice reform effort. The people in Jefferson Parish went out and found the MacArthur, went out and found Annie Casey, and asked them to come and help us. We knew we needed help, but we went and found those people. We weren't compelled to do it. We wanted to do it. With regards to bringing families and making families involved, what I would do, and what I think needs to be done, and which Casey has said needs to be done, you need more family evidence-based programs that include the family for therapy. MST-type therapy, those kind of things that work with the family as a whole, not just with the individual kids. Because if you fix the kid but put him back in the same family problem, you haven't fixed anything.
I do want to rebut that. I do want to rebut that.
Short rebuttal.
That is simply not true. And the reason I say that is because, sadly enough, the Jefferson Parish school system had a gentleman who was a counselor who was helping to determine whether or not children were appropriate to the system, and he made comments on Twitter such as, African-American children, they should be taken down like the dogs they are. He made 2 other comments. That man was never fired from the Jefferson Parish school system. He was allowed to resign. Despite what Mr. Burmaster has just said, indeed, the lawsuit was settled in Jefferson Parish, and it was the first in the nation settled. So I disagree with that statement.
And I have to rebut that.
Document.
The school system is separate from the court system. It's 2 totally different constitutional entities. As a lawyer, Ms. Fleming should know that. That had nothing to do with the school court system.
Point taken, but we got a lot more ground to cover, and let's move on, shall we? All right. Next question to Mr. Burmaster. What are the top 2 pressing issues? I know there's many, but the top 2 in the juvenile court system, and how would you address those problems?
I think obviously the services provided. That's the most pressing problem. We talk about lowering the incarceration rate, and Ms. Fleming was correct. There was a high reliance on incarceration, especially with regards to African American children. To reduce that reliance on the incarceration, you have to have services in place. You want to keep the kids with their family as much as you can, and you have to have the services that can keep them in place with the family, and those services have to be community-based. You can't have services, Jefferson Parish, we have a problem with the river. You want everyone to come to the East Bank who lives on the West Bank, that's a problem, and vice versa. You need to have community-based services where these kids can go to school and still get to the service they need to get the help they need. Secondly, in conjunction with that, the second big problem, money. There's always a monetary issue. One of the problems with the statewide system is hiring counselors and people that can work in the system who can do a good job, and you got to be able to pay them to do that.
And solutions you got in mind for that?
Some of the ideas, Jefferson Parish does have a millage. If you can get rid of the incarceration rate, incarceration costs a lot more than services. We've got to make sure that when we reduce the incarceration rate, which we have done, that money stays in the juvenile system. It doesn't get moved to a different pot. It has to stay there for the juvenile justice system to use.
Okay.
The 2 points to me are as follows. If you look at delinquents, you merely must back them up into truants, because as a general rule of thumb, children who are out of school, idle minds, idle hands, problems result. What we do in Jefferson right now is when children are truant, we end up with 2 things happening. The first is, many times, they end up going to court during school hours. That does not make any sense, in my personal opinion. I have promoted a simple, not expensive idea. Let's have court after school. Punish the children in that fashion. That's not cruel, that's not unusual punishment, although it might be to a child. The second thing that you do is this. In terms of delinquents, delinquent children, if they're delinquent, they lose and they eventually end up being thrown out of school. 65% of the people, just 75% of the people who are in jail as adults dropped out of school. We need to keep those kids in school. So Mr. Burmaster and I are on the same page in the recognition of that. But there are also clever solutions. As Mr. Burmaster has pointed out, we have an East Bank and a West Bank. We do have a river. We have courthouses on the East Bank. We have a court available. We can go to that court and we can use that court. That would be beneficial to the children. I also favor, to me, and I said it a little earlier and I will say it again, I think every single child should spend a night in jail if they're convicted. I think especially if they're young, they will get a message. The message is, do I want to do this? Do I want to be away from my friends? Do I want to be away from my family? Do I want to be locked up? And do I want to be away from all my great electronic gear?
Well, listen, we have one more question that we're going to get in before we take our first break, and it's actually going to go to you, Attorney Fleming. That is, let's say that you are elected and it does go your way. What's the very first thing that you plan to do?
Sit down and look at the numbers. I want to see where that money is being spent. I have concerns about that, and I have expressed that. I would like to see where the money is going, because I believe that will make a difference. But in terms of a non-money issue, court starts at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for delinquents.
Okay, all right. Attorney Burmaster.
I agree with Ms. Fleming on that also. I think the money has to be looked at. Juvenile court collects 5% on all child support cases. I'd like to make sure that money is being properly spent. I'd also like to look at alternative means to, doing court after school might work in some instances, but you got to remember, you got to get the clerk on board, all the employees on board. You need to make sure all that works. So, but the money, we have to look at the money. We have to also, I think, study Brevard. It's got 39 current beds. It could possibly have 52. If we wanted to do overnight type visits, you got to make sure you don't have those kids mixed with kids that are convicted of serious offenses. So we'd have to see something about possibly open up that one pod which holds 13 kids again, where you could keep anyone who's there for a minor offense separate from people that have major offenses.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you both very much. That brings us to the end of the first round of questions. We have to take a brief pause right now, but when we come back, round 2 of our forum on the race for Jefferson Parish Juvenile Court Judge. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this special 2013 election edition of Power of Attorney. Our guests are the 2 candidates running to become the next juvenile court judge for Jefferson Parish in Section C. So we're going to get back to the questions, John.
Right, and this next question goes to Ms. Fleming. Which juvenile court programs do you believe are working, and which programs do you believe are not working, and why? And you got a minute, so what can you
The
tell
child
us?
support program is a definite. It works. And the reason it works is because it takes money directly out of people's pockets with the employer, so they're not tempted to spend it. That was a problem in the old days. That's a great program because we get the money directly. It's like paying your taxes.
Anything not working?
Many. I think that part of the problem that I have is within the delinquency arena. I had a child, I remember one time, he was on charge BB, which means he had 28 charges against him. This child had never gone to jail with 28 different charges. Now, some of them were in groups, and I have a concern about that, because what happens is you send a terrible signal to a child and a parent, get a private attorney, and in all likelihood, things will work out far better for you than with the public defender's office. That's unfair, because we should not penalize children because they don't have the financial means to have a private.
That was not failing this child.
Juvenile delinquency program. I think that needs to be adjusted. I don't think those sentences are fair. That's just part of that, but that's a problem.
Okay. Mr. Burmaster, your thoughts on programs that are working, programs that do not appear to be working?
First of all, I think one that does work is the juvenile drug court program. That program does use the MST type therapy that we've talked about.
What is MST?
Multisystemic therapy. You deal with the entire family, not just the children's problems. You deal with problems of the whole family. What are the mom's problems, the dad's problems, siblings' problems, environmental problems, where they live. You deal with all those type of things to try solving the problems. I think juvenile drug court does work. I also agree that child support works. I think the child support program is administered by the DA's office. It's been around for 36 years now. I think in 75 or so it is when the DA's first took over. But it really does work. It's a good program. So I agree with Ms. Fleming on that. That is a good program that works.
A notable program that you think needs reworking?
In my opinion, I do think some of the delinquency aspects, as I said, I think Jefferson's a leader in juvenile arena. And while I love the Judge Conrad who's retiring, we haven't always been on the same page with her sentences and with other judge sentences. So I would think that there could be some sentencing options.
All right. I'm going to have you follow up with this question. Oftentimes, it's said that children who are in the juvenile justice system can have various issues handled by various courts and systems at the same time. How would you characterize these various entities and how well they communicate or fail to communicate with each other, the different courts and the way children in the system, their issues are handled by different courts at the same time?
Well, usually the juvenile court does take jurisdiction over everything. They even assume custody from the regular court when they come into our system. But you do have different agencies that'll be involved, and that's something the juvenile judge has to decide. The judge gets to decide who's the lead agency. So it takes a little bit of expertise and a little bit of research to just look at what is this child's problems and which agency, which state agency, which parish agency can best handle that problem and give them the help they need and help the family that's needed. And it's the lack of communication sometimes that does lead to some of the problems. We've had problems with getting information from the school system because, as I mentioned earlier, the school system is separate and apart from the criminal justice system. We can't just say, give us that information. There are certain federal rules and regulations that prohibit us from getting some of the information we need at times. So we've worked, the juvenile justice reform people have worked in the past 10 years to get better information sharing, and I think better information sharing always leads to better outcomes.
Okay. Let me ask the same question to Ms. Fleming. What about that? There's different agencies involved in that child. There's different courts that are involved. What can you comment on that?
That is true, but I think it is somewhat disingenuous to appear to say this is a complete block entity, the court system, and here's the DA, and here's the school system, and ne'er the twain shall meet on occasion. That's not correct. In fact, the problem is right now with the police, for the most part, stationed in every single school to arrest children for a simple offense as gum chewing. Things in the old days where kids, they call the parents. You call the parents on things like that. The schools get the signal, and the signal is very clear from the district attorney and the police. Have them arrested and we'll deal with them. When children hit juvenile court, they're half of the way gone. That's a problem.
Is that the norm, or is that more of an exception?
That's
when
not
children
an
getting arrested for
exception.
chewing gum in school?
It's not an exception for children to get arrested in school. That is not an exception. It's a sad state of affairs in the state. The problem that I have right now is we have entities. We have this dollar entity, that dollar entity, that big dollar entity, that big dollar entity. I've spoken with a great many African-American pastors and ministers, and this is what they've said. They've said, many of these children are our children. We want accountability, but what we really want is we want input. We're not even allowed the input in our own children. When we're there and we stand ready, and we've tried to get in, and we're not. And there is still, I think, a dichotomy that doesn't benefit all of our youth and all of society.
We want to get in at least one more question before we get to our closing remarks, but time is just really flying by. But I want to get back to the funding issue, the money issue that you all raised before. You said, both of you said that you really want to take a look at the books. Is that because you suspect that there is a problem, or is it because you want to make sure that everything is working just as it should? Attorney Fleming.
Okay. I would like to see the money better spent. That 5% that Mr. Burmaster speaks of, unfortunately, is not all to Jefferson Parish, but there's collection of money in other manners. When every time other pleadings are filed, money's come in. It may not be a lot, but it's money. But the child support money is a lot of money, with at least 2,000 cases new coming in a year. If a child enters the system for 14 years, that's a lot of money, because with 5% and with a minimum of between $300 to $700 per child, that 5% adds up very quickly. It's a minimum of several $million. That money, I'd like to see where it's allocated. I think we can cut back. I do believe we can do a better job on it. And Mr. Burmaster had pointed out something earlier, and I do want to address it because it sort of relates to that, and that is the after-school concept. That can be conducted right in Jefferson Parish, and those children can be transported by bus to the Yenny building and transported by bus to the West Bank, and that will save money. We don't have to have a full court. All you need is a judge in there.
Okay, Mr. Burmaster, the money issue.
I'm not sure if there's a problem, but as the head of the agency, the three judges are the head of the judicial agency, you're responsible for that money. So one of the first things I'd like to know as the head of an agency responsible to the taxpayers, the money that's collected, where is it going? Is it being spent properly? I always think you can look for a better, more efficient way to operate and save money. You know, the judges that have been there right now, I think they do a good job, but they've all been there. The shortest tenure right now, I think, is 17 years. So a new person coming in may have some some new ideas, some new ways to look at the money, new ideas for spending the money. So I do think, you know, I don't want to say there's necessarily a problem, but I do think there's an opportunity to make everything more efficient.
Okay, well, we are out of time, and so before we wrap up, we're going to give you all each a minute to close. And Mr. Burmaster, you went first for opening statements. Attorney Fleming, you get to go first for closing statements.
First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to be here. Second, I hope, again, everyone votes. Third is, I hope everyone remembers Veterans Day. My father was a veteran. He served in 3 wars for this country. My husband is a retired veteran. My son-in-law is a retired disabled veteran. The veterans deserve our respect, and I want to thank them for that. Next thing I want to say is, one of the things that bothers me is, and I alluded to it earlier, I do not have the support of any of the elected officials. There was a very interesting piece in the paper today about misspending of money, where the money that was allocated for the elderly went instead to the officials' pals. Those are people who have endorsed Mr. Burmaster. Now, we in Jefferson Parish right now, those elected officials, they took Woodmere, the largest African-American subdivision in the South, and they spent $1 million on a rec facility to help the children. And that's a wonderful idea, except those same elected officials, they allocated $10 million for an animal shelter. Now, when you're spending $10 million for an animal shelter and 1/10 of that for children, there you've got a priority issue. And I'm going to tell you right now, I get elected, that priority is going to change.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Burmaster.
Yes, once again, I'd like to thank you also for allowing me to be here. I mean, I guess I should respond to Ms. Fleming. I do have some officials are backing me, and I think it's because, you know, some people talk about the political machine and those type of people will back you. They get it right sometimes, and they got it right this time. I'm the most experienced candidate. I have the best temperament to be a judge. And it's not just individuals that have backed me. I've got the backing of the Alliance for Good Government, Crime Fighters, Louisiana Weekly, the Times-Picayune, every independent forum we've gone to, every independent body we've gone to, endorsed me out of all 4 candidates. The other two candidates that are no longer in the race have also endorsed me. I think my qualifications, experience, and temperament make me the best person for this job, and I'd appreciate your vote on November 16th.
Thank you both very much. We appreciate your time and appreciate you both for being here. We've learned a lot, and we certainly hope that you all have learned a lot as well. For more specific information about how and where to go vote, go to our website, johnredmondpoa.com, and there you will find a link to the Secretary of State's website with all of the details. John.
We hope that you have learned more about these candidates and that you will definitely go vote. Election Day is Saturday, November 16th. Thanks for watching, and remember, your vote matters and every vote counts. We'll see you next week on John Redmann, Power of Attorney.